Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this webinar, which GPL is hosting with Centrify. GPL Technology, if you don't know about us, is a customized IT service for creatives. We design, implement, and support innovative solutions that are tailored to your business goals and needs. The services we provide are managed services, hardware as a service, which we call VFX now, technical staffing, which we call Breed, and infrastructure solutions. We are here today with Centrify as they are one of our top partners, and we use Centrify in our own office, and we love it. So we want to let you know more about it and the great technology that it is. And we have Lance McAndrew here who will be speaking. You can do questions throughout the presentation. There's a question and answer box, and we will address them at the end. I will also be extending an invitation to everyone who attends this webinar to come to our upcoming vendor fair on June 22nd, where we will be featuring Centrify, and they will be doing an additional presentation, and you can do in-person questions and get to know more about this great company. So now I'm going to hand it over to Lance McAndrew. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I'm going to talk a little bit about what Centrify does, and I am going to show you some parts of it and try to keep it high level. I do have the little chat window open, so if there are questions, I will certainly jump in and share them. I'm just switching now to say share my desktop. So now you should be seeing my slide, but also my desktop. I'll talk through the kind of the Centrify view of security and the world and our approach on it, and then show you a little bit about what our solution does and go from there. I think everybody who attends a security webinar gets the overview slides of how scary it is and all the dark quotes and the statistics on this and that, and we include those in ours too. So here they are. And I'll talk to each of the parts of these slides and go into it a bit. Essentially, a lot of the analysts in the industry are saying, a lot of the big breaches that happen because credentials get stolen. And so that's an area where people need to focus a little bit more, and not as much is being done on that today. And let's talk about the approach we take to it is saying that identity is the new perimeter. A lot of people invest a lot of time and effort in network security devices, monitoring tools, all of that stuff, and that stuff is very relevant to tell if somebody's in your environment. But when someone's attacking your company, they're typically going to go after accounts, identities, and passwords. This is a Gizmodo survey from last year, the top 25 passwords. All the goodies are still in there. You might want to just check that now and say, okay, yeah, mine's number 7 or mine's number 12, or I know you don't use these. The point being that a lot of people don't take security that seriously or as seriously as they should, thinking this is good enough and that's going to work for me. The problem is if you have too many passwords, either you know it and I know it, you use the same one everywhere, or you make up a formula, which is this is my Gizmodo password 123, stuff like that. So is there more to just passwords for security, and where does security apply now? It used to be that a company was a network with computers on the network. That doesn't quite apply anymore, especially if your laptops walk out the door every day, or your users consuming data from a mobile device, or accessing data that you don't even manage anymore from anywhere. So this is kind of the use case we like to use, or I like to use to drive home the point. If you've got an employee who on a Saturday gets up and goes to Starbucks with an iPad, opens the iPad, connects to the Wi-Fi network in the Starbucks, and starts reading Office 365 mail or going to Salesforce, that's corporate data, but the user's on a platform that you don't own, operating on a network that you don't control, accessing data in a data center that you don't manage, but you're responsible for all of it. And the question kind of is, what do you own in that environment? And the only thing you really own is the identity of the user and how to validate that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the different pieces that we bring into this and what we think about it. So if you think about what bad people do, they use something called a kill chain, and you can look that up, or you're probably already familiar with it, which is they take their time to go after a company, and they kind of hunt around, and they look for weak points to get in. And a lot of it is, yes, get through a network, but get yourself to some credentials. And it may be just a regular user credential. Get yourself access to that network. Start poking around. Start looking for privileged accounts. Start exploiting the privileged accounts. Do the work that you want to do to start sealing stuff. The point being that every user is under attack. Every identity is under attack. So just locking up certain subsets of them or strengthening passwords might not be enough. And this is kind of where, everybody repeats the same thing. It's the identity that people are going after. So let's talk about what the Centrify approach is to kind of tighten this aspect of security up significantly. And it comes down to a number of points here, and I'm going to go through these as part of the presentation. Number one is let's start consolidating the identities. Can you get a user down to one user and one account and use single sign-on wherever possible for that account? So that account applies anywhere that someone's trying to access something. Our next big piece that we've added in is multi-factor. Can we say that, yes, I know it's your username and your password, but it's your mobile device or your SMS message, and I'm going to show you that. Are you using that as part of your login or when you are doing privileged operations or as an alternate factor when you're doing VPN? And in addition to just managing who you are and your desktop maybe at work, but maybe it's your user devices too. It's those mobile devices. You also want to have some access and control to those. Once you get all of that under control, you still have privileged identities. So how do you diminish the access to the privileged identities that you literally can't get rid of, like root, like administrator? Is there a way to lock those up and tighten them down so they're used as minimally as possible? Potentially, if they are used, they're checked out. And then finally, can you record everything that happens in a server environment in your organization? So I'm going to break this down into a number of different parts, and it kind of goes into end-user identities, privileged identities, cloud, desktop, server, all of that, and I'll kind of highlight the different areas involved with it. So I looked at a number of different studies that said how many corporate identities does a person have in an organization, and the different studies said different things. So I kind of grabbed a median number, which was in the middle of the different studies, and said, assume a user has 12 corporate identities and you've got 1,000 users in your company. The user, of course, is keeping a strong, secure password that you're rotating every 90 days, which is unique and isn't one of the last 22 passwords they've used, times 12 accounts. You're looking at 12,000 attack points for user identities in an organization. And you know that a user never reuses a password anywhere, okay? On the other side of that, if you think about privileged accounts, assume every server you've got has a root account or an administrator account. Same with every application, every network endpoint like a firewall, like a switch. And in a lot of cases, you need to use that account to do privileged operations on that device, but a group of people own that identity. So the network team all know the password to the firewall or to the router. In a lot of cases, you see activity that says, well, somebody named root logged in and made this change. Who has the root account? Well, at least these people do, and I know we gave it to this guy a couple of months ago because he needed to do something. I don't think we've ever changed it. So that's kind of the problem we're looking to help users solve. So let's talk about what we do on the cloud side. A lot of companies are accessing the cloud environment today, where they're getting more and more services like Office 365, like Salesforce. And what we see in a lot of those places is every time you sign up for a new service, you get a new identity, unless you do some specific integration of identities. So, hey, I've got 5 cloud services, I've got 5 cloud accounts. Our approach to solving this problem is to say, let's kind of consolidate that down. What's an identity you already have in your organization anyways? There's a really good chance it's probably an Active Directory identity. Well, can we push that out and use that for all of your cloud environment, for your Office 365, for Google? And can you integrate them all so that one identity is what you use when you access those environments? If I provision you or deprovision you, does that shut you off in that environment as well? And can I enforce single sign-on? So once I get into literally a portal, can I then go from there and say, okay, now I've got access to all the applications? So let me show you how this works in the Centrify environment. What you see here, and I'm going to show you how this applies in the two-factor space as well. So you can see my little iPhone is sitting here as well. And I apologize if messages pop up on that because it is a live device. When I go to access our corporate portal for Centrify, I log in with my domain credentials. And I'm doing this just to kind of walk you through the entire flow. Actually, it does a single sign-on for me from my desktop because I'm on the network, but I'm not going to show you that. And then as I enter my domain password, I'm also presented with a lot of additional two-factor options that we've configured for our environment. It can send me an email, a text message to my mobile device, a one-time passcode can be used off of my mobile authenticator, my secret security question if I don't have my phone. So for now, I'm going to do a text message. And with that, when I go to sign in, my phone pops up for me automatically, and it's telling me, hey, you just received a text message. Do you want to go ahead and approve this login request? So yes, I'm going to go ahead and approve that, and I'll just tap on the message. And as I do that, I'm taken into the corporate portal. And then the corporate portal draws all the applications. Because it doesn't know who I am, it's a little slow the very first time because I'm coming in as an incognito user. So it takes a second to draw the page. There we are. And with this, I see every cloud application that we have access to. My Office 365 is here, our expense tracking. You name the good ones like Slack, Jira, they're all there. And so when I go to access anything in my environment, I'm not re-authenticating with credentials. It already knows who I am. It's using secure SAML authentication to get me in there. And I apologize for showing you my mail, but I wanted to demonstrate that's Office 365. I've also got this running back here, and I've got multiple browsers up, so I may switch between. My WebEx is in here, our Salesforce, all of that. Plus, I have the option to add my own identities and my own accounts. So my Southwest Airlines pass is right here. And it's remembering my username and password in this case, but we've given users the option to consolidate all of their identities and all of their accounts into one place. So we've reduced the footprint of access for cloud applications down to a user and identity, multiple factors that depend on where he's logging in from or the time of day, and reduce the amount of an attack that someone can perform against that person. The other thing I also see in our cloud environment are my mobile devices. So there's a full mobile device management suite in here. You can see my iPhone, my iPad. I'm also actually running on a Mac. I haven't registered this, but that will also work. And just to show you where we are, we're in Northern California between San Francisco and San Jose. So that's me at Centrify World headquarters here. So I'll switch back a little bit to the cloud environment. So what you see here is single sign-on identity consolidation in the cloud space to Active Directory for all the applications you're using there. What you're also seeing is mobile support. Hey, we know what mobile device you're going to use. It's okay for you to run these applications on that. We're going to provision you into that. We're going to give you single sign-on on that. We're going to use it as a two-factor device. Keep an eye on it. And then if you're leaving, of course, we deprovision and offboard you, and then we can ask to unenroll your device, remove corporate mail, leave your information that's personal there, such as the pictures of your child, and go from there. So that's just one of the components of the Centrify suite, the cloud single sign-on, and the mobile device management are all in there. Okay, so once you start getting users' cloud identities out of the way, let's talk about what we do with privileged identities. And in there, I want to share some insights, some experiences I've had. I am a T-Mobile user for that phone that you saw, and T-Mobile sent me an email a few months ago or a letter saying they're very sorry, but Experian lost all of their data for all of my credit card data. Well, actually, no payment card data, but all of my user information was lost from T-Mobile. So what does T-Mobile do when they, or Experian do when they lose your data? They sign you up for an Experian service. So I got a free membership to my Protect My ID Elite, which then I register all of my data in there again. for them to keep an eye on it and tell me if anybody's using it. And then 2014, I registered my car with the DMV, went on the DMV site, and I did a credit card registration. It was really convenient. I thought, oh, this must be safe. It's a DMV, but the DMV outsources credit card processing to a third-party processor who lost all my data as well, got another letter, and more credit card monitoring. I have several years of free credit monitoring. A few years before that, I subscribed to a newsletter site called Strat4, and they got broken into, and all of their identities got stolen, which was mine, and I got free credit monitoring for that. So about once a year, I lose all my data, or somebody loses it for me, and then they sign me up for free credit monitoring. So I've had a good realm of, none of the free credit monitors tell me when my identity is being stolen from anybody else who lost my data, but at least they're trying, right? To bring it all down to a point, the thing is in all of those cases, privileged identities were used to get access to the data. They'd lost track of who had access to the accounts or they were breached. So there are super user accounts out there that are used by default for daily activities just because it's convenient. And then you can ask yourself on the phone here as a just kind of a little mini quiz, which of you, put your hand up, don't worry, I can't see you. Are you the user who has access to all the secret accounts in your company? If so, you're the person that hackers are trying to attack. It's you. Typically when I do this talk in a room full of people with 100 people or so, a number of hands will go up between 30 and 50%, sometimes as high as 70, and I go, you're the ones they're trying to attack. Just so you know. So everybody kind of looks around the room and sees each other and knows what they're in for. So the approaches that we take for privileged identity management kind of come down to the following. Consolidate the identities, which is, when you're logging in again, let's get you back to using one account, which potentially is that personal account you have or the Active Directory account. When you log in, we're giving you the least amount of privileges we can to get you to log into the box. So that's least access. What machines do you see? As few as possible. Least privilege. What do you get to do? As little as possible, unless you do privilege elevation. If you're going to do privilege elevation, what does that mean? Well, the two-factor comes in again. So you're going to do something as an administrator. Good, let's just send you an SMS here while we wait, and you confirm it's you, and then we'll let you on your way, and then let's record that session and play it back. So let me kind of walk you through how a lot of this works. Least access to us means, when you log into the minimum number of machines. Unfortunately, the way the Active Directory environment was set up and Windows was set up to start was, if you had an Active Directory account, you could log into every Windows machine. Right? We've kind of realized you have to move past that to say, well, maybe you don't need access to all those boxes. So we're going to only give you access to the ones that you require. So what we do is we make agents for the Windows platform that allow you to do access management of who has access to log into the box and privilege management on Windows. What commands do you get to run, or what desktop do you get to be as a user when you do something? The same thing also applies in the Unix space. We make agents for every Unix platform that says, I'm going to join you to Active Directory, and I'm going to require users to use their Active Directory identity when they log on to the machine. The way we manage the two-factor stuff is through here. Essentially what we're doing is saying, for the types of environments that we manage, whether it's cloud, whether it's server, whether it's Unix or whatever, we're going to set up a second factor of authentication for you, and the second factor is configurable at the customer level. So we say, as a first factor, we're going to have you do password. As a second factor, once you've successfully solved the password thing, we're going to say you can use a one-time passcode, a phone call, a text message, an email confirmation code, or your secret question. So as an administrator, you define what these second factors are, and you define when they get used. So you can build out rules to say, if I'm coming from inside of my network, I don't need to do two-factor again. Or if I'm coming from a machine that I've logged in multiple times before with two-factor, I don't need to do anything. If you're from a separate place I don't recognize, you're outside of the network, you're on a machine I don't know, then all the two-factor rules apply, okay? So with this, once two-factor is applied to a machine, let me go back to my PowerPoint. We use two-factor as part of our least privilege elevation. So In that, we're saying the users log in with their own accounts. We're going to give you specific permissions, whether it's Unix permissions to run services or be root, or whether it's Windows permissions to be an Exchange administrator or a SQL Server administrator. We're going to assign you those permissions on a temporary basis. So you get to be root for the next hour, or you get to be root for the next day. Then we're going to turn those permissions off. A lot of times we work with companies that do audits, where the auditor says, I see you granted this user root permissions 6 months ago, why didn't you take it away? And they go, well, we forgot, or we got busy. So users have permissions that have been granted to them that just never get taken away. By putting a time frame around a privilege assignment, you're able to have the user you do what they need to do, but then have it shut itself off after a certain amount of time. So to us, least privilege looks like this. You're logging in as your regular user to do stuff. Then you're doing privilege elevation to get to do specific tasks that you need to do, but then at the end of that time, that's over, and you need to come back and work as a normal user. So you're not always logging in with a root account just to do basic tasks all day. On the privilege lockdown side, what we do is if you go into our environment here, and I'm just going to kind of show you this. The privilege management to us says, what do you do with all of the accounts on all of the machines that you can't get rid of? So we've got literally listed every server where we've got an account that we need to manage like root, like administrator. And I'm actually going to switch over to this browser here to show you my test environment. So with this, what we see there. This is my test environment where I see specific resources. I need to get access to this Unix machine, and I need to do certain things like I want to get access to the root account. So for that, we've added a workflow mechanism around it to say, well, if you really want to do a login to the root account, you better ask for permission for it. I need access to this because I am doing a demo. And so as part of that, workflow gets activated. The administrators who can approve that request are notified by email. Give that a second to load. And the request actually shows up under a list of requests that administrators need to approve. And with that, then an administrator can go in and approve that request for someone. And as part of that, and I can grant it on a permanent permission basis or a temporary basis. So if I go and do that, you can see there's my workflow request coming in live, and then I've just approved it. So literally, I'm approving my own request because it's a demo. In a real environment, obviously, you'd have, there we go, my request has been approved. As part of that now, when I go to log into the machine, I now have permission to log in. I'm logging in to that machine as root, but one of the things that you see here is that I was never given the password to that account. So we can do a silent login, and you'll see I'm actually doing an SSH session through a browser. But the user's been given permission to be root for an hour, gets to do the work that they need to do, and then that identity that he used, that password actually gets reset. The next part of that, to bring this all together, once you start allowing users onto machines, you're going to want to be able to record the sessions that you have. So the Centrify Audit Analyzer tool allows you to go back onto any machine where session recording is enabled and to see every time a user logs onto that machine and anything they do in that environment. So what you can see here is for every user, I can see when they've accessed machines. In this case, it's mostly the same machine because I have the same machine. What I can also do is look at all of the sessions they've had historically. I can go back to any Windows session or Linux session and view that again, and then replay that session. So with this, it's like watching a video. I can go ahead and say, okay, now I want to play this session ahead. And then you're watching what the user was doing in that session. So I'll slow that down. And what session recording allows you to do is to close the loop and say, I've granted this user permission to log on to the machine. I've given him these rights. He has to do two-factor to do the authentication, and I've recorded the session. So when it comes time for an audit, you can go back to the auditor and say, I have a clear chain of authority for the user from authentication through to the tasks they performed and validation of the tasks, and it's all right here. And that's what it's looked like on a Unix side. On a Windows side, same thing. Obviously, there's more data involved here, but I can go back in and say, okay, I want you to replay this for me. And you will literally see what the user's doing on the machine in video as they walk through. And I'll slow that down just a bit. And this is an administrator monitoring sessions. So it's kind of recursive in that I'm monitoring myself, monitoring sessions. And then you have the ability to go in and search across sessions and say, show me any time this user logged into this machine and what they did from there. So do a little bit of a wrap up. What we're doing on the privileged account side, obviously, as you see, is just locking them down. So anytime that a root account gets used, the password is securely stored with Centrify. The user needs to check it out. Two-factor authentication can be used to validate the user, a workflow to approve it, and then the account is used and the session's recorded. On the two-factor side, the interesting thing we like to think about is, what if your password is stolen and it really didn't matter? I'm not going to publish my passwords, but in the case where if there is some kind of a breach, a password's not enough to get into a system. It's a password and a second-factor device that you define. So we call that context-aware. You know, is it the right device? Is it the right user? Is it the right time? And is it the right location? If any one of those fail, you can reject the user on a session. And this was the privilege elevation I was going to show you. When a user goes to log on to a machine and do extra tasks, we can say, we require you to do an SMS question literally on a Linux machine before you log in or do your work. So that's kind of an overview of what Centrify does in that and I've got a good architecture slide to show you here. I'm going to jump to that. So the different areas we've covered as part of this presentation are an identity service, consolidating user identities down to Active Directory, and then providing single sign-on into any type of cloud application you want. Also, mobile device management, so that you have some knowledge of what devices users have in their possession and what they're using them for in terms of company data. On the server suite side, what we do is integration of the Unix, Linux environments into Active Directory, and privilege management for Unix, Linux, privilege management for Windows. And auditing is also a part of that in terms of session recording. Password vault for all of the accounts that you want to manage centrally and then allow users to check out. We provide secure remote access. You saw that I was logging into a Linux machine through a desktop browser, so I had to check into my privilege service before I had access to the Unix machine, and session monitoring was there. In addition, we provide multi-factor across all of this environment. So for cloud, for server, for privilege, there's multi-factor everywhere. That's kind of a summary of what I wanted to cover today. We want to open it up if there's any questions.
So the question is, can we use two-factor authentication for remote users to log into their Windows desktops and laptops?
That's a work in progress. So the two-factor for, we call it desktop login for Windows, is something we're developing now. We've got an aggressive time frame on it. It's this year. It's the later half of this year. Stay tuned with us for that. The approach is to give you that same list of options for two-factor, whether it's SMS, secret question, whatever, but give you that on a Windows desktop. So we're working on that now. We got the Unix, Linux part solved. We got privilege elevation solved. The Windows desktop is the last piece in the chain.
We have another question now for Eric Recht, asking, can we evaluate the software?
Totally. Melissa, I think that's with you. Mike, you know, how do you want to have people reach out to evaluate this. Would they work through you, Melissa?
Yep, you can contact GPL. Just contact us at sales@gpltech.com, and we'll be able to get someone to get in touch with you.
There's also a lot more information just on centrify.com. Literally, if you go to docs.centrify.com, docs.centrify.com, we've published all of our documentation. I'm very proud of that. So all the manuals for all the products are there if you want to walk your way through them and get information, you know, on your own.
We have Joaquin Romero. He wants to know what's involved in configuring what applications you want to manage on a mobile phone.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll share back my environment. So you can see the environment up again. So this is the cloud portal that I talked to a little earlier, and you can see all of my devices in here. Androids work just as well. I just happen to have a set of mobile devices, and then I'm going to turn off my mail. So let that go away. Does this work for both? Srinath, I see part of your question. Does this work for both cloud and in-house app? Yes, it does. Thank you for that. Let me get rid of that. Let me get rid of that. Come back. So what we're doing on the device side is we're allowing you to register users' devices, whether they're company-owned or personally owned, in the mobile device management suite as part of this. And what I'm showing you now, it's taking a second to load because there's about 1,000 devices here. This is literally everyone's device at Centrify. So what I'm going to do is go to iOS, and I'm going to show you my phone. So what this allows us to do is from here control what applications we want to push as a company out to the device. I can see my applications here. My children put Snapchat on here. So as part of this, you can also, there's a full device app store in here. So for us, mobile apps are considered to be anything that Apple produces in the Apple Store or the Google Play Store. You can also do in-house applications if you build your own. So you'll go ahead and you'll specify like Office 365 or the Google environment apps. And when the device is registered to the cloud, we will push those applications over the air onto that device. If we're using Android, Android for work. The Google folks have built out a service called Android for Work and Google for Work that is a full, essentially a container of devices, a container of applications for the Android device where you can push mail and everything else, and they live in a separate container. If you want to unenroll the device, that container will disappear. The same thing doesn't really exist on the iOS side, but you can push applications to an iPhone, like Office 365, Slack, or whatever, and unenrolling the device will just remove the applications that are managed by Centrify. Okay? Does it work for both cloud and in-house applications? Yes. So one of the things that we built into this cloud suite here, let me show you this. You'll see a number of applications on here. You'll also see an RDP desktop, so I can get to an in-house Windows server from my cloud environment. I could literally be at home accessing this desktop. And this shows our SAP product that we use. But I didn't have to use my VPN to do it. So we're literally running an RDP session through a cloud proxy to people as needed. But also in here, our Jira server, for those of you familiar with Jira, is running in-house on a central server in our office. But we're using something that we've built called the Application Gateway, which lets me proxy the web traffic from our company through the cloud to me wherever I am. So this is me accessing our internal Jira server. Without using a VPN, I could be at home to do this or on the road. And if I wanted to, I could have a second factor authentication pop up before I access this application. In fact, you'll see here, this is our expense app. And even though I'm logged into my portal and doing my work, I can do two-factor. And this is my mobile authenticator, which is my one-time passcode. requiring me to authenticate. Now it knows that I'm on my mobile device, and it will authenticate me there. So you can add that on top of any application in there if you want. And if you say it's a mobile authenticator app, it's only going to let you authenticate from a registered device. You could turn off all the other factors of authentication to just say, it's got to be your handset and it's got to be this mobile auth.
So thank you so much again. Really love the Centrify team. It's a great company, and I hope that you've got lots of great information, and looking forward to giving you lots more and working with everyone. Thank you so much.